welcome to episode 156 of Board Game Blitz, a podcast about all things board games that you can listen to in less time than it takes to get over the fact that your friend put their meeple in the only spot that would have been beneficial for you, and now you're just staring at a sea of bad options, and what in the world are you going to do? Board Game Blitz is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. This week, we are talking about worker placement games. First, we discuss a couple games we've played recently, like Scooby-Doo, Escape from the Haunted Mansion, and Planet Unknown. Then, we share our top 5 worker placement games. And now, here are your hosts,
Ambie
and Crystal.
Before we get into the episode, I wanted to mention that we have a contest going on right now over on our YouTube channel. Yeah, we have a YouTube channel in case you didn't know. It's at youtube.com/boardgameblitz. And the 6-year anniversary of that channel was on April 24th. Our podcast anniversary is also coming up next episode.
But very, very soon.
Yeah. But I remembered earlier than the anniversary date this year. And so I made a video to celebrate, and where I'm having a contest and giving away a box of fun stuff that is unknown right now. So you can head over to that video. I'll link it in the show notes to figure out how to enter the contest.
It's a mystery.
Yeah, the prize is also a mystery. Recently, I got to play Scooby-Doo Escape from the Haunted Mansion, which is a escape room type story game that was published in 2020, designed by Jay Cormier and Senfoon Lim, published by The Op. And we mentioned this a couple of episodes ago, actually. Crystal had played it, and then I said that I hadn't played it yet, but now I've played it. So.
Yay!
This is in the Coded Chronicles series of games. They have a couple of other ones, but Scooby-Doo was the first one. And the way this works is there's different characters and different rooms that you're exploring in a mansion, and you're moving around. It's fully cooperative, and you don't each control one character. You control all of them together and make decisions together. And each character also has a book with a lot of passages in it that you read. So characters can interact with different things in the room. The rooms have numbers on them on the different items, and then the characters have numbers. So you put it next to the number, and then it has a 4-digit number, and then their book has 4-digit numbers in there that you go through to read the passage, and things happen. And then there's also some puzzles. It reminded me of the adventure games. Is that what they're called? From Cosmos, which we've mentioned before.
Yeah.
Those are more story narrative driven escape room type things. I guess not really escape rooms, but narrative driven one-time play games. And this is similar, but it had more puzzles, I think, because in addition to just the books and the map that you're placing tiles out on, there's also secret envelopes that you open at certain times, and those had some puzzle things, like physical puzzle components, which I thought was really cool because I like doing the physical puzzle things in escape room games. So I had a lot of fun with this. There was a misprint in one of the books that made a puzzle difficult to solve or kind of not work. So that was sad.
And now I don't remember. I feel like we ran into something too, but now I can't. It's been so long since I played it that I don't remember.
So this isn't going to be a spoiler what the misprint is. So they have color shaded and non-shaded to differentiate the passages. So you stop when it changes, right? So in one of them, it had the switch of gray to white before the end of the passage, and it was at the end of a sentence, so it seemed like it could be the end of the passage. So we stopped reading, but it continued on and then said oh, then you get this thing. So we didn't read that part because it looked like it was the end of the passage, so we didn't get the thing that we needed.
That didn't happen. That didn't happen when I played it. So either we must have not realized the mistake and just read it, or something.
Yeah. So I think if we had looked at it a little bit more closely, then we might have read on, because on the left side it has the numbers, and so the numbers line up with the start of the passage, so there wasn't a new number, so you could kind of do it, but because the shading, it's just kind of unclear. That was the only, I think, thing that was misprinted, I think, in this game. But yeah, the game itself, it had a cool story. I don't know Scooby-Doo that well, and I think the people that I played it with also didn't really. Maybe one of them had watched it some, but we weren't super into Scooby-Doo. But it was still fun and goofy theme. You're going into a haunted mansion and trying to figure out who this ghost is, and that's in a Scooby-Doo story.
Yeah, that's classic Scooby-Doo. Is there's a bad guy or there's a ghost, and if you take off the ghost's mask, then you reveal who it actually is, exactly what, and it felt like, it's interesting because I also weirdly did not really watch Scooby-Doo at all growing up, even though I'm the right age for it. It just wasn't something I ever got into. No shade to Scooby-Doo, but like I still know those tropes, right? People still talk, you're still familiar with like the Scooby-Doo. Yes, right? Like everybody kind of knows those, and it did feel very much like a Scooby-Doo adventure to the point where I think one of the reasons I liked the theme so much, even though I am not a huge Scooby-Doo fan in general, is a lot of the escape room games that we've played either take themselves too seriously or kind of don't make any logical sense. Like, why would you be trapped on a haunted roller coaster kind of a thing? You know what I mean? Like, like it's like they either make no logical sense at all, or they are taking themselves way too seriously. And you're like, no, you need to put some lighthearted stuff in here. The Scooby-Doo theme fits with an escape room puzzle really well. Like the silly things that you encounter in an escape room game, like, oh, there happens to be 8 padlocks on this door. That's not from the actual game, but just like it makes sense in this context. And so in my mind, it made the theme and the game mechanics shine even more.
Yeah, and like the theme was very silly. There's the 5 characters and they each do different things. So like one of them can investigate. That was like Velma, I don't remember, or research. And then Shaggy eats
like,
things.
All
he does eat things. Yeah. Scooby smells things. And so it's like, so we're like trying to eat things. But he's like, I would want to eat that, but I'm full now. Or like,
yeah, no, they had passages in there for like, things that you're like, well, wait, but what happens if Scooby sniffs that? Like, and then the book is like, yeah, there's nothing interesting about that, you know, kind of, but it's funny about it.
Yeah.
There was one other thing about this game that I really liked that was somewhat unique from other escape room style games that I've played, and that was the puzzles that you encounter come in these little envelopes, and then when you finish with a puzzle, it specifically tells you how to put it away right that instant, which for somebody like me, when I finish an escape room game, even if it is technically replayable and you can reset it, by the time I'm done playing the game, I don't want to reset it. My brain is like, I'm done with this, put it all in the box, I don't want to deal with it. And in this game, it was very much like, okay, now put all of these things back into envelope number 3. And I did those things. And I was like, oh, now I can easily pass this game on to somebody else. And I don't feel like it doesn't feel like as much work to me.
Yeah, like I was already like trying to keep track of that during the game because I like you doing that during the game usually. And then it told me, I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, I wonder if it does this for all of them. And it did. So that was cool.
It feels like it was really thoughtfully created in that regard. And I actually own one of the other coded Chronicles games. I own the one that's about The Shining, although I've heard that this one is not
really
good.
Low ratings on BG.
Yeah.
There might be more misprints in it or something. I'm not sure.
Ever since I heard that, I've been afraid to pull it off the shelf. I bought it secondhand from somebody here in Vegas, so I didn't pay full price. And then the third one is the Goonies, which I don't know if that
better ratings.
Better ratings? Okay, yeah. And I want to try that one at some point too. But at some point, who knows? Maybe I should stream the Shining one. So even if it's bad, like we can at least make fun of it on stream or something.
Yeah. So that was Scooby-Doo: Escape from the Haunted Mansion.
I recently had some friends over to play games in real life, which I've been doing, not a whole lot during the pandemic, but had some friends come over, and my buddy Greg brought over a game that I had not heard of at all, not one tiny bit, and that was Planet Unknown, designed by Ryan Lambert and Adam Rayberg, published by Adam's Apple Games, LLC, which I believe is a new company. I think this is their first published game. I probably should have checked that, but I believe they're fairly new. Planet Unknown is a space-themed game where every player has a planet in front of them on their own player board that they need to colonize using polyomino tiles. Polyominoes are similar to like Tetris-style tiles, but they don't necessarily have 4 blocks in them. Tetris is 4. Polyomino means any number of. So some of the tiles are smaller or larger. And what's really cool about this game is you are drafting tiles from a Lazy Susan, an actual spinning Lazy Susan that comes in the game, and all of the players draft tiles simultaneously. So all of the actions in this game are taken simultaneously, which makes the game feel really interactive and move really quickly. And every round, the active player gets to spin the Lazy Susan however they want. And then based on where your little player thing is pointing, you get 2 options between which tile you can take from the Lazy Susan. So the active player gets to choose exactly what they want. Everyone else potentially gets stuck with something, but you always have 2 options in front of you unless one of the wells in the Lazy Susan has run out. And what's really cool is the tiles are made up of a bunch of different colors that relate to different tracks on your other player board, and you get to increase those tracks every time you play a tile that contains that color. So for instance, you could go up on the civilization track if you play something with black on it, or you go up on the water track if you play something with blue on it. There's 5 tracks in total. You're always moving up at least 2 of them each turn, generally. And as you move up those tracks, they give you cool abilities or victory points or the ability to move up another cube on a different track. On top of all of that, there are 2 different ways you can kind of play the game in general. And that is each board, there is a side of every player board that is the same planet and the same tracks. And then if you flip them over, there are also asymmetrical planets and asymmetrical player tracks that work differently. Like the numbers go up differently or the abilities are different. And the tech abilities for each planet on those sides are different as well. It is fascinating how unique some of those different planets appear to be, and yet how balanced they seem to actually play out as. I really, really dig this game. I like polyomino games. I've mentioned that a number of times in the past. And this one, there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's still really relatively simple mechanically. Like, you place a tile, you move your little cube up the tracks, and then you do the things based on where your cubes ended up on the tracks. And the things are relatively simple, like moving your rovers around on your planet to pick up life pods or destroy meteorites or gaining new tech, or picking up cards that'll give you victory points at the end of the game. I want to play this again. Greg, I know you listen to the podcast. You should bring it over again soon. Because this one honestly was super fun. I think it just delivered from Kickstarter. I don't know if it's coming to retail, but I might honestly have to get myself a copy of this one. It is quite fun, and I haven't heard a lot about it yet, so I guess probably if it did just ship from Kickstarter, that might explain why. But I imagine that this is one that, as people discover it, is going to gain even more popularity. Polyomino games tend to be pretty popular, and this one seems to be one of the better, I would say, on the medium to leaning toward heavy side of polyomino games. So I would highly recommend it if that is a genre of game you enjoy. So that's Planet Unknown.
Cool. I was thinking it might not be known because of the title.
They should have called it Planet Known, and then everybody would be aware of its existence. Uh-huh. You know what we haven't done in a while, Ambie?
A top 5 list.
Yeah!
Yes.
And everybody loves lists. And you know what else I love?
What?
Worker placement games!
Yes.
There's a lot of ways you can categorize tabletop games.
Mm-hmm. And
I would say for me, I have found generally, I really tend to enjoy a lot of worker placement games. It tends to be a genre of game and a mechanism that is very satisfying for me. Is it one that you tend to gravitate toward?
Yeah, I think I do too. For the games that I play that involve worker placement, I like them. I don't seek them out usually, but I think I tend to enjoy them. And we should probably explain what it is. It's hard to define these types of games. And when I clicked worker placement on Board Game Geek, there are some that I didn't feel were super worker placement like. But for me, worker placement involves when you want to do an action, you place your pieces, which are called workers, down onto the board to do an action. And they usually block other people's putting workers there in some way. Or it's a shared action board with shared actions, and you take turns putting workers on there and taking those actions.
I'm actually looking at the BGG listing for the definition of worker placement. Uh-huh. And I would say that BGG kind of agrees with you, although they don't say it exactly that way. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm going to kind of paraphrase and skip around, but it describes it as a stylized form of action drafting, where players are placing tokens to trigger an action from a set of actions that are available to all players, generally one at a time and in turn order. And then I'm going to skip down. It says there is usually a limit on the number of times a single action can be taken. And there was an asterisk next to the word usually that leads down to a passage that says the use of the word usually in this context is a somewhat controversial point of discussion. For purposes of BGG classification, action blocking is a defining element of worker placement. In that case, there must always be a limit on the number of times a single action can be drafted each round. What's interesting about that, though, is based on that definition, there are technically games classified as worker placement on Board Game Geek that would not qualify. But I get, like, there has to be wiggle room, right?
Yeah. And then for me also, I think there are some on Board Game Geek where it's like just worker placement among your own things. Like everyone has the same actions available, but like each person can do the one action one time. So you're not blocking other people. And I don't think of that as worker placement as much. So like Arkwright was on Board Game Geek as worker placement, but in Arkwright you have your own column of actions that you're choosing from, so like everyone can do like the same action on a turn. So I picked games where most of the actions are like limited among all the players, not just like one per player or something.
Yeah, and for my games I generally picked things where worker placement is the primary mechanism of the game, or the biggest kind of mechanism of the game, because there are some games that I own that I really like that do involve small amounts of worker placement, but not to the degree that the ones on my list do. And anytime we do a list like this, I kind of, when I'm going to rank things, I try and figure out, why do I like worker placement games? Like, what is it about a worker placement game that I enjoy? And for me, when things are abstracted in games, my brain has a harder time kind of figuring out what to do. If things are just nebulous, or just like a list in the rule book of all the actions you can take, but there's nothing in front of me, and so I just kind of have to like think about it. Whereas with worker placement games, generally I can look at the board and I can see what's available. It's more concrete. It's easier for me to like see it, and especially if other people have taken actions that block spaces, then it limits the number of things I have to choose from, which makes the decision making potentially easier as well. And so I think that might be why I like these games so much, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I like the tension and like, when should I try to take that action, because I want to take it before someone else does. And then also, I think a lot of them tend to be kind of thematic. Like the workers are going out and doing the things, so they're busy doing that thing, and you can only do so much with each worker. Like, so I think like they tend to be slightly thematic sometimes.
I would agree. I think there are some really thematic worker placement games. So why don't we talk about some of our favorites?
All right. So my number 5 is Bus, which I've actually only played once. So Bus is a Splotter game. Splotter is a company that makes like heavy interaction games. And Bus is a game where you're planning bus routes and like picking up and delivering passengers on a shared board. But the worker placement, so you each have these workers and they're limited for the whole game. So you have like a pool of workers, and then each round you're placing them on these action spots. And there's actually a lot of spots for the actions, but like the order that you place them matters. So whoever places first is going to be really good for that action, and the other ones might not get as much. Or there's like only 1 or 2 things for that space that's actually available. So only 2 people actually be able to, I mean, like you can place more people there, but you're not going to be able to do anything. So it's very tense trying to figure out all the actions that you need to do, because you need actions for everything, for building your routes, for like moving the passengers, for getting new passengers and stuff. Like everything needs an action, and then you need to use them all, and you want to go first on everything, but you can't. And then also an action for taking the first player marker, which happens in a lot of worker placement games too, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
But yeah, so Bus is my number 5 because I've only played it once, but I really liked it. So it might move up on this list if I played it more.
I have something kind of similar for my number 5, in that technically I have never played the physical version of this game. I downloaded the app, and the app is a faithful recreation of the board game, and that is Raiders of the North Sea. This is one that I had heard talked about, for years now as a really good worker placement game, and I had just never gotten a chance to try it. So I downloaded the app, and I've been playing through the campaign in the app. And yeah, it gives you different goals for each scenario of the campaign. It's still the same game with the same board, but you have specific things you're trying to accomplish, or things will score differently in the campaign. The neat thing about Raiders of the North Sea is you have one worker at all times. And what you do on your turn is you place that worker into a spot and do that action. And then you pick up another worker from the board and you do the action of where it was located. And so there's this interesting back and forth, because if somebody else doesn't go to a spot that you want, and there's two things you want to do, but they're both empty at the beginning of your turn, you will not be able to do both of them. And so there is a little bit of kind of metagaming, trying to predict what the other players might do or go to and what you want to do. There's also, the workers come in different types, different colors, and some of them can do certain things but not others. And so when you're picking up a worker, you're like, okay, this is a black one or a white one that can't go to that spot, so maybe I should pick up this other one instead. There's a lot of interesting strategy in that mechanism, and it makes it feel different than other worker placement games I've played. So I really actually would love to try the physical version of this game at some point, but I've been playing it a lot in the app, and so it felt like it was worthy of my number 5 spot. That is Raiders of the North Sea.
Yeah, I played that once when it came out, and it was really interesting. And I don't know of any of their worker placement games where the workers are shared, because a lot of times you have your own workers, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because you don't want to put down a worker that someone else is going to use it. And it's no, I don't want to go there anymore.
Right? You're like, oh, well, that one is going to give him a really good action or whatever.
All right. My number 4 is actually a cooperative worker placement game. So when I was originally thinking of this list, I didn't think of cooperative games, but then I looked on the BGG worker placement things and I saw some, and I'm like, oh yeah, that is worker placement. And I love cooperative games. So my number 4 is Kitchen Rush, which is a real-time cooperative game where the workers are hourglasses. So, I love real-time cooperative games, and this is a very hectic one. The theme is you're in a restaurant making food and trying to serve all these customers. So your workers are hourglasses, and you have to go on the different spaces, like the oven, you have to get pantry food, you go to the store, and you put the hourglass on the space, and then when it runs out, you can put it onto a different space and flip it over. So that's thematic, because they're the people rushing around the kitchen trying to do all the food stuff, and then it takes time for them to cook and stuff. So it's still blocking spaces, because there's only 4 oven spaces, and so everyone's trying to cook at the same time. Then that gets blocked, and we just have to wait for the other person to finish, and it's very hectic. So yeah, Kitchen Rush is a very unique worker placement game.
My number 4 is one that you all have heard me talk about over the years many times, and that is Champions of Midgard, specifically with its 2 expansions. And I do have to make that clarification. And I also want to specifically say that Champions of Midgard is published by our sponsor, Grey Fox Games. No favoritism here. I've loved Champions since before they sponsored the podcast. But to make this game really shine, you do need the 2 expansions. So that way, because this one is in alpha on Board Game Arena, and I tried playing it, and it's just the base game, and I was just like, this is awful. Because I'd only played it with the expansions. I'd never played it without. Oh. And when you send people into battle and they die and you get nothing as a result of that, that's really disappointing. And with the expansions, even if your warrior, your dice die in combat, you get these little tokens that you can spend for things. And so it doesn't feel quite as depressing. For the record, the base game's not awful, but in comparison, it paled. Oh, okay. But Champions of Midgard with its expansions is one of the best worker placement games for me personally. It is super fun, and it is very tense, kind of as you were saying about okay, should I go to that spot now? I need food, but I think they're going to go get food. But if I go there, then they're going to go fight the troll, and I want to fight the troll. So there's a lot of interesting decision making there, and lots of cool things you can do. And it does feel pretty thematic as far as worker placement games go, with all the neat stuff you can do. So that's why Champions of Midgard with its expansions is my number 4.
My number 3 is Kanban. So there's a new version called Kanban EV, but I haven't played that one. So this is the old version. Kanban is designed by Vital Lacerda. It's my favorite Lacerda game, and the first one that I ever played. But the theme is that you're a manager in a car factory, and you're trying to manage your time well amongst all of the different areas of the car factory. And you have to do a bunch of different things, like you get designs, you have to test drive cars. There's like a bunch of different things you have to do, and you have to like get certified in different areas. If you ever like played or heard of other Lucerda games, there's always like a lot of steps you have to do to get something done. And it's similar like that. And there's 2 different ways of scoring, so it's pretty complicated. But the worker placement part, you have one worker. It's worker placement with one worker. So like you are the worker thematically, moving around to the different sections. And then there's different spaces in each section that are like the one that goes first, but it has less time, and then the one that goes second, but it has more time. And like the time is how many actions in that area you can take, kind of, because each action takes some time. So like if you really want to get like the thing in that area that's first, then you have to go in the first one, but you can do fewer things there. But then if you don't care as much, then you can take the second one, because like you're worried about other people taking the thing that you really want. So there's that, but then also like you stay there and then you can't take that same action again because you move to a different department each turn. So like there's blocking of yourself because you can't go in the same spot again, but also like you're blocking other people because when you move, the other people are still on the spot that they were. So like you can't go where someone has been, like everyone's just staying on the board the whole time, which is kind of interesting. So it's like lots of planning ahead, and then also for like your own path, because you have to do a lot of steps, but then also seeing what other people need to do and when spots will be open. So if you're really into that planning ahead and stuff, Kanban is a great worker placement game with one worker.
My number 3 is Pursuit of Happiness. This one's from Artipia Games, and it is a worker placement game that I've loved for many years. I own every single expansion that has come out for this game. Technically, the last couple of expansions haven't shipped yet. I did back the big box on Kickstarter, even though I've said on this very podcast that I should stop buying big boxes. But in this instance specifically, I have added in all the previous expansions, and I can teach it with those expansions. So I am hopeful that I will continue to play it after the big box arrives. We will find out. But Pursuit of Happiness is basically the gamers version of life, basically, because you are setting out to build a life. You are a person who can pick up hobbies and a job and a partner in whatever combinations you want, and then the expansions adding cool things like a community board and experiences, and you literally are scoring points based on all of the things you do throughout your life, and your workers are time. They actually are wooden hourglasses. They're not real hourglasses. They don't tick down anything, but you get a certain amount of time at the beginning of the game, and then as the game progresses, you move up on a track that reduces the amount of workers you have because you're getting older, and then eventually you die. That is how the game ends, is when everyone is dead, and that is a little bit dark, but thematic. It makes sense. Yeah. And sometimes you can get some really cool stuff done in that last phase when you're elderly and you only have a couple of workers left, but like you can get some neat stuff done if you plan it out right. You just got to live a healthy life early on to make sure you make it to your elderly years. It feels incredibly thematic, more so than you would imagine for a game with basically just cards, a board, and some wooden hourglasses. But I always have such a good time with this one, talking about how, oh yeah, I'm a computer programmer who's dating a girl named Eva, and we like to go skateboarding on the weekends, and like kind of just making a little narrative out of the cards that are in front of me. And I got to teach this game to you, Ambie, a number of years ago at BlitzCon.
Yeah, it was a fun game. I've only played it that one time, but yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I really like it, and I'm excited for the new stuff that will be coming from their most recent Kickstarter. That is Pursuit of Happiness. My number 3.
My number 2 is another cooperative worker placement game, and that is Robinson Crusoe. I actually don't own this game. I only played my friend's copy, and I also haven't read the rules, so like I heard the rule book is really bad. So
isn't it fun to have played a game a whole bunch of times that you've never read the rule book for?
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
But Robinson Crusoe is a cooperative game where there's different scenarios in the game, so like they have different objectives each time, but you're trying to survive on an island most of the time and like have different objectives. But there's different things you can do. You each have 2 workers, and you can work with other people. So like when you go to different actions to do different things, like you can build things, or you can go hunt, or you can try gathering or exploring or something. But you can go with one worker, and then it'll be risky, and you roll dice, and like bad things can happen. Or you can go with 2 workers, and then it will be successful, Oh yeah, and like when it's risky, it might not be successful. Or you can do 2 workers and guarantee a success, and like bad things won't happen. But like you always feel like you need to do a bunch of stuff because you need to get food. You need to get enough food to feed everyone and not die. And then you also have like other objectives that you're trying to do. You have to build stuff, build shelter, and so
yeah, what, like living on a deserted island is hard? What?
Yeah,
I don't believe it.
You don't have enough workers to play it safe and do 2 workers for everything you want to do. So you have to like decide, okay, for this one, like we really need to do this, so we're gonna double up the workers here. But then like this one, we can risk it and then spread out over here and then trust the dice. So that feels pretty thematic because as you said, living on a deserted island, difficult. Yeah, so I like thematic cooperative games like that.
And this one's a hard one. I've played it once or twice, and like we got our butts handed to us.
We played through, I think, all of the scenarios in the base game. We got a good rhythm with our group. We always only played 4 players too, so I don't know like if player count makes it harder or not. But yeah, so Robinson Crusoe was really fun, but I haven't read the rules.
And that was your number 2.
Yeah, that's my number 2.
My number 2 is Caylus.
Yay!
I love this dang game, and I want to specify, you said your 3 was Kanban, not Kanban EV, because you haven't played it. My number 2 is Caylus, not Caylus 1303, and I have played that, and it is not what I am selecting here. I'm not saying Caylus 1303 is bad. I just don't like it as much. I like original Caylus. I recently got my very own copy of the first edition with the king on the cover and everything, so I now own it, and yeah, Caylus is an incredibly thematically boring game where you're building buildings and collecting resources and trying to build the castle with the resources you collected. And this game is fascinating to me because really there is no luck involved in this game. There's no unknown quantities. There's no deck of cards you're drawing from. There's no randomness. It's all right there in front of you. And you just have to react to what the other players are doing and be smart about it. And I'm just enamored with it. I'm not always super great at it. I sometimes make poor decisions, but I really do love it. It's a lot of fun. And I would say if you're like me, and you tend to shy away from the boring themed Euro games, maybe give this one a try. Who knows? You might like it like I do. So that's my number 2, Caylus.
It also can be really mean with collusion too, like because there's the moving the provost back and forth to deny people the actions on those spaces.
So that's okay. So here, this is a good point. We should actually talk about this because for years I had only heard Caylus is so mean. Caylus is such a mean game. And I'm not saying that those people were mistaken or wrong. Like, moving the provost back to deny people their actions is mean. But again, it's not a random thing.
Yeah.
Everybody has the opportunity to go to the worker placement spot that allows you to move the provost 3 spaces for free every round.
And like, people are taking a risk putting their pieces out.
Yes.
There.
Right.
So.
If you put your pieces near the end of where the provost is, you're taking a risk. And if you don't control the provost, it's an even bigger risk. And if you don't have the money to negate the provost movement, you kind of can set yourself up in that regard. And so, yes, it can be mean, but it's not surprisingly mean, those are the types of games, like when somebody has a card in their hand in like a take that game, that just like, oh, you don't get to take your turn and you didn't know it was coming. That feels really icky. In this game, when you put all of your workers in front of the provost and somebody moves it back, nobody is like, I'm shocked. It's like, well, that makes sense. Like, like I shouldn't have done that, or I should have controlled the provost. So if you've heard that it's a mean game and that has kept you away, just know that it isn't as bad as you would think if you're smart about it.
It's just it's a different type of mean.
Yeah, for sure. It's the type of mean that I'm apparently okay with, because I don't like meanness in games, and I like this one. So
yeah, same with me. Like, that's the type of meanness that's fine. All right. My number 1 is probably not a surprise, but it's Dungeon Petz, which is one of my favorite games, and I've mentioned it a lot on the podcast. But in Dungeon Petz, the theme is you are imps running a pet shop of little monsters that you're selling to dungeon lords for their dungeon because they want little monsters, and they each want like different types of monsters. It's kind of like a Tamagotchi, game because you're taking care of these pets.
It kind of is. That's an apropos comparison.
So you're trying to, like, there's a market where you buy different pets, you buy cages for them, you buy food, all those different things, and that's where the worker placement happens. But then you like want to take care of the pet's needs, and the pets have different attributes that get different points depending on which dungeon lords and exhibitions and stuff show up. But with the worker placement part, it's different because you each have a group of workers and also money that counts. When you do the worker placement, instead of doing one worker per spot, you group your workers into groups of one or more worker plus money. This is all done secretly, simultaneously. And then like whoever has the biggest group, that group goes first, and then the next biggest group. So one person, if they have 2 really big groups, can go first and second. And then like if someone else has 5 small groups, they go like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, like they just get 5 turns in a row at the end. So
they get more actions, but potentially not the actions they were really wanting.
Yeah. So like it's another one where you balance like, oh, which actions, so how many actions do I need to do? Like, but I need to go first for some of them because I really want that specific pet or that specific cage or like that specific action that only has one spot. And so like, oh, I needed to do like 3 actions, but then how should I group my imps and stuff? So that combination is really exciting for me. So that's Dungeon Petz, my favorite worker placement game.
My favorite worker placement game, my number 1, is Architects of the West Kingdom. So similar to Raiders of the North Sea, which is from the same company, in Architects of the West Kingdom, there's a kind of a unique twist on the worker placement mechanism, because in Architects, there are very few spots on the board that only one player can go to. Most of the spots on the board, any number of players or any number of workers can go to those spaces. And the number of workers you already have at a particular location will improve what you get to do or collect at that spot. So for instance, if you're getting wood, when you put 1 worker down, you get 1 wood. If you put another worker down on another turn, you'll get 2 wood because you have 2 workers there. So your actions get better the more workers you have in a spot. But there is a spot on the board where any player can go, and then they can round up all of the workers of, I believe, 1 other player from 1 or more spots, depending on player count, and put them in jail. And then you have to go to a different worker placement spot to get your peeps out of jail. And there's a thing that will trigger at certain points throughout the game. And if you have the most people in jail, bad things happen to you that can get you negative victory points. So it's interesting because if you keep going to the same spot, kind of similar to Caylus, like, you're basically asking for someone to come grab your meeples and send them to jail because they're not going to let you collect 5 wood, you know? Like, that's just, like, I've found generally, if you put 3 workers in a spot, they're gonna get rounded up before it gets back around to you, because that's just a lot of resources that you get to collect by placing a single worker going forward. So again, kind of similar. It's mean, but visibly, like, you can see it coming kind of mean. You set yourself up for that, and so differentiating which types of actions you're taking is important. Another thing that's really cool is the virtue track in this game. If you are very virtuous, you might get victory points at the end of the game, but you won't be able to visit the black market because the virtuous would never go to the black market. And so if you are down low on the virtue track, you might actually get some penalties at the end of the game, but it will potentially unlock things like the black market where you can get some really good stuff. So there's a lot of interesting decision making to be had in this one. Every time I play this one, it's great. And I really do like playing it at the 2-player count, where the actions change a little bit in the way they work, but I like it at the larger player counts too. I actually have the first expansion for this game, and I have not gotten to play it with the expansion because I got it during the pandemic. So I'm really excited to try it with the expansion at some point, but regardless, I love it. My number 1, Architects of the West Kingdom. We would love to hear from you all what your favorite worker placement games are, so please hit us up on social media or our Board Game Geek Guild and let us know what your favorite worker placement games are.
And that's it for this week's Board Game Blitz. Visit our website, boardgameblitz.com, for video and blog content, as well as to get links to all our social media pages. This episode was sponsored by Grey Fox Games. The Game Found campaign for Last Light is ending today. Head to lastlightgame.com now to reserve your copy. And don't forget that Blitzketeers get 20% off non-exclusive items at greyfoxgames.com when you use the code GFGBLITZ2022 at checkout. Join the Blitzketeer community on Discord by following the link in the show notes to join us for great discussions and online game nights. You can support the show by leaving us a rating and review on your podcast provider. And if you want behind-the-scenes access and an invite to our private Slack channel, visit patreon.com/BoardGameBlitz. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Morrow. Technical support provided by Toby Mouth. Board Game Blitz is part of the Dice Tower Network. Until next time, Everybody's working in this board game. Everybody wants a meeple there. Bye, everyone.
Bye!
Kitchen Rush is a very unique worker placement time. Or worker placement time.